Yeah, it looks like we have Bernie now. Nathan, Scott, Phil is there. Dr. Walter. I don't see Attorney Jacobson, who is our parliamentarian for today, just yet.
Hi, Dave. Can you hear me?
I do. Thank you, Brent.
Okay.
Eric, a quick scan of the screen suggests that that everyone is here, but at least insofar as Board of Control, when we come to those introductions, I think appropriate to have a roll call.
Sounds good.
So I've got 9:01, Eric. If I may, because this is a special meeting of the Board of Control and outside of our normally scheduled business meetings, it is the first meeting of the new 2021 school year, and as such, it would be an appropriate order of business to receive a motion to recognize Eric Russell as the coming year's president for the Board of Control.
So moved, Willie.
Second, Scott.
So we have a motion by Willie, a second by who, please?
Scott.
Thank you, Scott. All those in favor of President-elect Eric Russell stepping into the very pleasant seat and chair as president for this school year, please say aye.
Aye.
Any to the contrary, please say no. We have a unanimous acceptance. Thank you. Mr. President, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Dave. Again, welcome everyone to this special meeting. Appreciate you taking the time and making the effort to do this for our youth, for the youth of Wisconsin. This is going to be a challenging decision.
I'm assuming it's playing, okay? The
We
stream?
know that no matter what decision we make, somebody's going to be impacted and probably adversely impacted. So
What's that?
with that, I want to start by making sure we all know who's on the call. And so we have Dr. Walters. We have our attorney, Brent Jacobson. He is not only our legal attorney, but he'll also be the parliamentarian today. We have the Wada president, Todd Sobritsky, president-elect Nathan Delaney, past president Jeremy Schiltz, and executive director of Wata, Greg Smith. I believe I saw John Ashley also on call, and I'm not sure if I saw Mike Thompson. He is on the call. With that, I would call for a roll call vote, or a roll call for the Board of Control to make sure that we are all here. I'll just read off the names, Dave, and they'll say aye.
Yes.
So Scott Lynch.
Present.
Eric Russell, present. Bernie Nicolay.
Present.
Dave Stepak.
Present.
Willie Chambers.
Present.
Jennifer Vogler.
Present.
Bill Ertl.
Present.
Mike Humke.
Present.
Paul Peterson.
Present.
Mike Bigley.
Present.
And Carl Morin.
Present.
All present and accounted for. We also have on the call the executive staff for the WIAA. So with that, I'm going to ask Dave to speak to the authority of this meeting and the responsibility that we have with them.
Thanks, Eric. Because we have two new board members attending their very first meeting, in a special meeting setting, we haven't had opportunity for complete orientation of our newest of members. But we're talking about the board taking up and considering a proposal from the members to move around the sports seasons. The specific proposal from the southern Wisconsin, southwest Wisconsin part of our membership was to suspend fall sports and to begin our sports seasons come the winter, December, January, and then look to find, thread the needle to get fall sports inserted into a late winter, early spring, early summer format, and push the spring sports into a later spring and summer window. Now, the authority for this meeting then comes from the WIAA members approved constitution, whereby under Article 6 of the Constitution, talking in Section 2, we talk about the authority of the Board of Control, and the members have determined that the board shall have general control over all activity and persons involved in this membership and the official school teams of any sport sponsored by this association. The board has the sole authority to interpret the provisions of our Constitution, bylaws, and rules of eligibility. Number 2 in subsection A is that the board shall have the authority to make changes whenever necessary in the rules and regulations of the association, except in matters of the Constitution itself, our bylaws as a membership, and the rules of eligibility. What that means very simply is that the board has emergency powers. You can, at the very least, make temporary decisions. You cannot change the Constitution, bylaws, rules of eligibility forever in a unilateral action. Any permanent change to bylaws, Constitution, rules of eligibility require membership vote, majority of the membership. But what we're talking about here, beyond just the authority to have this meeting, is our sports seasons. And the members in the Constitution and bylaws have given the Board of Control complete control and oversight over the sports seasons. When we start, when we begin, when we end, how many games we play, what does a tournament look like? That is under the absolute authority of the Board of Control. And that is primarily the focus of the board's work here in our discussions today. So are there any questions about how and why and the authority that brings us to our business today from new board members or others?
Thank you,
Eric,
Dave.
with that then, I know that Dr. Walter on short notice has tried to join us today, and I know he does have patience. Dr. Walter is, for the board, the new board members, chair of our Sport Medical Advisory Committee, and has been leading that group in the development of our summertime contact provisions, as well as transitioning that into sports season guidance. But if we can fit Dr. Walter on, it would be a good time.
Yes, this would be a great time to hear from Dr. Walter.
All right, can you guys hear me? Am I on, Eric? Excellent. Thank you very much. So thanks for having me back. Again, Kevin Walter. I am a pediatric sports medicine specialist. I work down at Medical College of Wisconsin, Children's Wisconsin, and I've been fortunate enough to work with the Sports Med Advisory Committee. So if I call it SMAC, that's the nickname, the abbreviation for it. It's not being rude. But working with the SMAC, geez, for now, almost 15 years, and it's been wonderful. Since the last time, I'm not going to review everything about COVID like I had done before, but since the last time, we've all learned more about coronavirus and COVID, but we still have a lot to learn. We don't know when it's going to end. We don't know when the vaccine will be there. this is difficult to see science in action, and people will ask, well, geez, before they talked about no masks, but then they said masks and do mask work, and it's as we find things out, it changes what we used to do, and a lot of times we are used to something like strep throat, where it's been scientifically proven for a long time. Hey, you take these antibiotics, you get better in 24 to 48 hours. There's no controversies around that. All of those things happened back in the day. Right now, we're working through these controversies, and not to be political, but now, of course, we've got politics involved with it, which makes it even more difficult and a little more emotional. So what I want to push forward is, as expected, we know this is not going away. So we have to learn to adapt, and we have to learn to live with the virus. And that's going to change what sports look like, how we can train, things like that. And I really do think that the WIAA has been ahead of the curve and really working on that, as you can see by summer, the return to summer, where certain areas of the country have had problems with returning to sport. We really haven't had that many issues. And just, anecdotally, when I drive down the road and I check out my 2 community high schools working out, they are doing and following the WIAA recommendations. When I take my elementary school daughter to her softball game, I can tell you there's not really any following of that. So, I really am proud of how our schools and our coaches are really working and adapting to reduce the risk to our communities and our athletes, reduce that harm, and really improve safety. So I think the other thing, since this is not going away, we also have to know the benefits of participation. And I know all of us know this on this call, but I think it's worth repeating again that, obviously sport has physical fitness benefits. We know from Dr. Tim McGuine's research that there's mental health benefits to participation in sport, and then there's just the social and emotional health benefits that our students have. So there are a lot of benefits to participation. The harm is, we think activity can increase that transmission risk. We know that kids still have lower risk, so we worry about kids because they can get sick, and kids with, CDC keeps tabs on higher risk comorbidities. If you have heart disease, you are at higher risk if you get COVID to run into serious illness or problems. So we know that kids still have lower risk for severe illness, but they can get it. The bigger risk is these kids can then transmit to adults, the community, take it home where the kid will be fine, but they bring it home to grandparent or a parent undergoing chemotherapy, and that parent is higher risk, gets severe disease, bad outcomes, things along those lines. So really working to reduce and mitigate those risks as much as possible. And in the end, some of that adaptation is going to be families. We all know there's risk to life. We're all going to have to assess our individual risk and comfort level with participation, be it in sport, be it in going to restaurants, be it in other non-sport activities or involvement. There's risk to all this stuff. And as a family, we're going to have to make those individual hard decisions on our own. My other big concern is if school activities go away, then the void will be filled by others. And I strongly feel, as you can tell from my story before, that the WIAA is positioned and the member schools are positioned to really do this as best possible. So I fear that if school activities go away, other activities creep up, there's less oversight, maybe less responsibility, less medical partnership. There's potentially an increased chance for harm and risk that I think with the WIAA and member schools working together, we can do our best to mitigate that risk and reduce that harm. So those are my updated thoughts. I'll pass it back to Eric if there's questions or worries to go from there.
Thank you, Dr. Walter. Appreciate your input and all the work you've done for the WIAA. Are there any questions for Dr. Walter? Dave?
Yeah, Eric, if I may, Kevin, you provided us, as you have all along, with current and most recent publication and research and information. Wasn't there a new article coming out just today from American Academy of Pediatrics? Is there anything new in there to share with the board?
Thank you, Dave. Yes, there is. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has released an article. It's actually just out today on interim guidance for return to sport during COVID-19. And it was worked on with kind of all the subspecialties of the American Academy of Pediatrics, from infectious disease to cardiology to sports medicine. And it's a pretty good article. I mean, it's written not too medical, and it's fairly brief, and it just kind of hits the highlights of what are some of the benefits of coming back, things that we talked about, what are some of the risks, things that we talked about as well. And then it just looks at, I've got a copy of it right here, talks a little bit about masking, reinforcing kind of the triad that we've always hit on is physical distancing remains critically important. Masking remains important. Now, athletes should not mask when they're exerting themselves, but when they're coming off the field, especially if you can't physically distance well, masking should be a must. And I think coaches should wear masks, officials should wear masks, things along those lines. And then it talks about the third one of if you are sick or showing symptoms, let someone know and do not go to practice, do not go attend and observe. If you've got symptoms, if you're sick, you've gotta alert someone. And that, I think, is one of the difficulties. Is if someone turns positive, we kind of have a best practice for athletes that if you have a positive COVID test, the thought is you need at least 3 days of no symptoms, no fevers, no medication to control symptoms before considering returning to sport. Probably that needs to be at least 10 days after your positive test. And most likely we want these kids to have medical clearance before they go back, because some kids with underlying issues may be at higher risk for cardiac problems. So we want that team all involved there. What we're trying to really figure out is, what if I have it and I've been practicing with Dave and a few other people? How long do they need to be out? What are those processes there? And so this AAP document goes into some of that, but those are the questions that we're trying to answer quickly and get to the bottom of as best we can. Sorry, that was a long answer, Dave. You know me, I like to talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Walter? Not seeing any. I appreciate your time, Dr. Walter. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here, and have a great meeting, guys and
Thank
ladies, everyone.
Oh, with that, we will move into our agenda. For the board, we are looking at, considering a proposal that was brought forward by the membership. So that is one of our tasks today, is to decide if that is something that we are interested in pursuing, or if it's a modification, or if it's something else. So that's what we're looking for here today, is some direction for the state and for our youth. So as you're listening to the information, we know that you've all gotten a ton of emails, heard from a lot of different perspectives all across the board. And so now we need to decipher that. We will give each of you an opportunity to speak to what you're hearing in your region. In the end, we need to kind of remember that we are trying to do what's best for the entire state. So with that, I want to maybe turn it over to Wade to just kind of to maybe summarize the survey and the proposal for the board, if you would?
Sure. The survey that was put out was written and suggested by John Bales of the School District Administrators Association. And you'll see that the results do indicate that when we gave them the options of which they would like to do for the fall, 15% decided that they would like to go ahead and begin as planned. 22% wanted a delay. So we have about 37% or 38% that want to continue with their fall sports. There was 51% of the respondents that said that they would like the Southwest plan to be looked at. And then there was 10% that said that they would like to go ahead and have the fall season canceled. When we went down to whether or not they would like, if we did do the season, how they would like the seasons to be maintained. 40% said they would like the regular season and eliminate the WIAA tournaments. There was 57% that said they would reduce the regular season and hold the tournaments. So we still have a majority that would like to have the WIAA tournaments. We did ask about summer contact. 231 schools did go ahead and have summer contact. 123 did not. So out of the schools, total 357, about half did go ahead and have, or a little bit more than half did go ahead and have some summer contact. And when we did ask that question, we wanted to follow up and ask them if anybody that they knew who participated did have a positive for COVID-19. The respondents were 21 said yes, and then 93% said no. So, and that's the assumption that there may be some connection, and there may not be some connection with that. Then we did the final question that John asked them was how many of the respondents were public schools, 319, and 39 were not. So the total respondents was 358. Keep in mind that we do have more superintendents than that. We have 511 member schools. So the survey is roughly, 358 out of 511 member schools.
And that survey was sent to district administrators and then private school presidents, correct?
Correct. It was sent to all the members of the OSA public school and district administrators, and then they did send another link to all of the presidents of the private schools.
Any questions on the survey from the board? How about executive staffs? Have you had an opportunity to look at the Southwest proposal and kind of maybe break that down? I know that there's been work on the calendars. Maybe we want to start with Steph speaking to the calendar, or?
Good, yes.
All right, thanks, Eric. If you take a look at, I can share my screen just to make it a little easier for everyone to see this. Can you see the calendars now on my screen? Okay. So based on our staff conversations and conversation with the board, we put together kind of a composite of some calendars for you to look at those. First of all, we've got our normal calendar just for reference. So you can see what that looks like. The P indicates a week of practice only, and X indicates a week of regular season in which you can play games and competitions, and then T indicates the tournament weeks. So again, this is our regular calendar. What we did is we put together several so you can look at them for comparison. So first of all, here is the Southwest proposal laid out in the same fashion as our normal calendar was, showing some rearranging of the seasons and that extending through the summer, through the month of July, not beginning until December 14th. We also looked at two models that the Wada membership had looked at. They looked at a Southwest truncated version, so beginning that winter season a little later after the first of the year, shortening all 3 seasons, and concluding the spring at pretty much the regular time that our WIAA tournaments currently conclude in the spring. Wada also shared this suggestion with membership, which was a flipping of the spring and the fall seasons, again, ending at the regular time. And then based on our discussion with the board earlier this week and also staff, we put together a few other suggestions. One, a calendar that looks at just a delay of all fall sports until the week of September 1st. We looked at delaying just football until that week of September 1st. And then we looked at a calendar that would model all fall sports delaying until the week of September 14th. So as we proceed through the conversations today, this will be good to have these calendars to reference to see where there might be some pros and cons to each. And feel free to ask questions at this time, or we can move into talking with each executive staff member.
Any questions on the calendar before we hear from the executive staff? Okay, as long as we have Stefan, why don't you speak to your sports?
Sure. First of all, the Softball Coaches Association has taken a position. They are very opposed to the Southwest proposal. They have a fear of drastic loss of players due to jobs, family commitments, and other summer sport options. They also have a concern with a conflict of lack of facilities. Many schools do not own their own softball facilities. They're fearful that they will fall in line behind the youth programs, the adult programs, and the travel teams. So not only losing out on kids, but also on facility availability. They have another concern that they're going to lose out on coaches, asking them to coach throughout the summertime. And so that is a concern of theirs. It's a real concern. And they ask that, spring has already lost so much. They lost all of last spring. If they ask that if we must put something into the summer, they request it not be the spring season because they've already dealt with that once. Volleyball Coaches Association, Girls Volleyball Coaches Association has not taken a formal position on this proposal. They just feel that their membership is too diverse to take a stand. They have some support of it and some opposed to it. Certainly with girls volleyball, the club season that goes into the spring becomes a concern of those. Club season starts very shortly after the regular volleyball season begins now in December and goes through the spring. So they do know that they would have a lot of girls that would come into conflict. They request that if this does occur, that the board and our staff look at flexibility with coaching contact rules, possibly playing dual sports at the same time and other things like that, that they think that would help them out. Their concern with the small schools is that they will lose a lot of kids to club, and the small schools would really be at a disadvantage not having as many girls to play the regular high school season. The boys volleyball do not have a formal association. So I reached out to the boys volleyball representative on our coaches advisory committee. They also would have a similar conflict with the club players having to pick and choose between high school and club. And that could be a concern of schools, but they would be willing to look at a spring season because there are other states in the country that do currently offer their high school boys in the spring. So they are more open to looking at that as kind of an experiment or as a test. The Gymnastics Coaches Association really hasn't taken any formal stance because many of these plans don't specifically address or have a large shift of the winter season. However, I would ask that you keep in mind that any type of a truncated season for gymnastics definitely could be a safety concern. Gymnastics is our only sport that has 3 weeks of practice before any competition is allowed. And again, it's due to the high risk of the high level events and competition, and they really need the practice. So again, keeping in mind that if there is any type of shortened season, that becomes a concern for gymnastics.
Thank you, Steph. Any questions for staff? All right, how about Tom? Are you on?
Had to
Tom
get
available?
Steph's screen taken care of. Thank you. All set. Thanks, Eric. Eric, as the board knows, I'm fortunate enough to work with the sports of girls golf, girls tennis, and girls swimming, and have been in contact with each of the coaches associations as we've progressed this summer. They are each recommending and would like to see some form of fall sports season for girls as their first choice, with first choice being the sooner they can start, the better. Certainly, if a delay is necessary, that is understood and acceptable to them. But our issue is that these are proven sports that have been operating tournaments in non-school areas throughout the summer. We've had numerous coaches and various other individuals involved in these tournaments and meets. Appropriate social distancing strategies have been working and have allowed both practice and competition in the sports to be held. One letter from the PGA Junior Association indicates the items that they've done in order to make that happen. In addition, we've also had guidelines provided by the United States Tennis Association so that tennis tournaments can operate, and USA Swimming has also provided those guidelines that have been being followed and that we would be looking at utilizing as well. Keep in mind, these are fall sports and they're girls' sports. So we recognize the value that they have, as Dr. Walters indicated, for the mental and social health and the overall well-being of the student athletes. The impact of losing these in the fall are lost opportunities. We will have sport conflicts if they're moved to other seasons for students. We will have non-school conflicts, and there will be facility conflicts that have to be overcome should these have to be used. One of the facilities issues became very evident with boys golf as we attempted to look at different dates for the state boys golf tournament. And moving it just a week created issues with students not being able to participate in the entire golf season because of other commitments that they had, along with some of the facility issues that our schools ran into in dealing with their courses as they tried to make changes to their seasons. Perhaps even one of the other elements that hasn't really been looked at and is considered as a concern that's come from each of them for those students that don't have elite status in their sports. We've always prided ourselves in education-based golf, tennis, and swimming and diving, and being able to provide a wide variety of opportunities, of competitive opportunities, to a wide variety of skill-leveled students. We know that there is paid instruction that's available for many, many students, but by the same token, there's probably at least twice as many who don't have available to them that paid instruction and seek the training of our high school coaches. This is something that we're losing out on time with during practice and competition, those reps and that extra opportunity for them to compete in these competitive sport opportunities. And it's particularly true of those sports where and those teams that have large numbers. For instance, in tennis, our coaches pride themselves with no cut policies and being able to get opportunities in tennis for each and every student. So we've got some programs that are very large, 60 to 100 students participating. And obviously courts limit the number of participants that we can have there. In addition, with swimming and diving, USA guidelines are recommending only 24 in a workout at a time. These are things that are limiting the student athletes from being able to really accomplish and proceed as they'd like to. Obviously, with the loss of August, the biggest concern probably comes in golf because the majority of meets do get scheduled for the girls as far as their duals and multi-meets are concerned in the month of August. So substitute teachers might become an issue should that be moved to September if school is involved, along with any conflicts that there might be as far as the start of school and issues that come up in that area. Our golf courses have expressed concern about the movement to and influence that any might have with summer, as far as some spring sports going to the summer and boys golf going to summer, because of all of the patrons that they are now dealing with over the summer months. And this is something that they are looking at very seriously and considering as far as their revenues go, especially when you think of the fact that we deal with a lot of those what we'll call mom and pop golf courses. Those courses are the ones that a lot of high schools have gotten a great relationship with and are able to really make work in their areas. So we all stand prepared to provide these seasons once we're allowed to do so. And we look forward to working with the board with whatever determination is made.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Kate, would you like to go next?
Morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my coaches associations that I'm working with. I'll start with the cross country, track and field coaches association. Their membership took a survey this past week based on the available models or the models that they were aware of. They asked their membership about 5 potential models. 1, keeping the sports season as is. 2nd, flipping the fall and spring sports. 3rd, the Southwest proposal, or what we're calling the Southwest proposal. 4th, a little bit of a different proposal where we start girls tennis, cross country, girls golf, girls swim in the fall, and use the Southwest proposal for the other fall sports. And then the final option they had was delay until mid-September with the 8 to 10 week season where that's possible. I know that that's not possible 8 to 10 weeks in several of the sports if we don't start until mid-September. The results of their survey was the #1 option. 58% of the Coaches Association wanted option 1, which is to keep the season as is. The #2 selected option was starting in mid-September, and there was 18% of the Coaches Association who was for that as the secondary option. The clearest messages that are coming from the Coaches Association for track and field and cross country is that they are not in favor of moving their season to the summer. Their 2020 season was completely lost. They feel that this would be, another lost year for many of them. Participation would suffer with summer jobs, graduation, lack of transportation, and other summer sports and departure for college. They believe that their coaches' availability would be in question. There are coaches who this year used the extended spring season days to work with their teams, and they would be asked to once again give up their family time, their vacation plans with their families for a second summer in a row. They also feel that in large part this may be football driven. They don't want to be quote unquote the sacrificial lamb to save the football season and get bumped into the summer. Moving to the Soccer Coaches Association, boys and girls soccer. I'll start with boys, although it's the same association speaking on behalf of both. Club soccer for boys takes place in the spring, and their main concern is that they believe their participation numbers would suffer drastically by moving to a spring season. A number of coaches have shared that they feel they would not be able to field a team in the spring due to the club opportunities. They feel that kids would choose the club over playing for their high school teams in the spring for boys. Girls soccer, they had a lot more to say about girls soccer. As a spring sport who lost their season last year, moving them to the summer feels unfair. The Coaches Association wants to protect their girls soccer season if at all possible. In summer, the youth soccer is a huge part of what happens in the summer, and they host a lot of large tournaments. They feel that they would be in competition for officials to work high school tournaments, high school games in the summertime, and they believe finding enough officials would be very difficult. The Coach Association believes that there will be a distinct shortage of officials for girls' high school summer season. Finding venues to host games would also be in question because many of them are already booked for youth events in the summertime. Athletes, they believe, will choose to play club soccer for a full year rather than a summer schedule for their high school team. They think participation would suffer. I know a lot of this is repetitive, but I want to make sure I'm the voice for each association. So they believe that participation would suffer due to jobs, graduation, lack of transportation outside of the school year, getting to practices, other summer sports, and departure for college. They believe that coaches' availability would be in question. And again, coaches who utilize the extended spring season days to work with their teams this summer would be again asked to give up their summer for a second year in a row. They believe that strength and conditioning programs for all sports are in full swing during the summer, and that girls soccer athletes would have to choose between playing a summer season or preparing for another sport through strength and conditioning programs. They believe that scheduling would be what they're calling a nightmare due to kids leaving for college, weekend graduation parties, family vacations, etc. during the summer months. They think that they would be in a no-win situation. The proposal that is coming forward out of the Soccer Coaches Association is that they are not in favor of the Southwest Plan, but they would prefer a shortened boys season over moving the girls season into the summer and playing boys soccer in the spring. As far as basketball goes, again, as Stephanie mentioned, they are the least, the winter sports seem to be the least affected or altered by the plans that we're seeing. So at this point, for the options that have been brought to light, the Coaches Association has indicated that they could work with any of the plans, with the exception of the truncated season, which reduces their basketball season from 18 weeks to a 9-week season, with 1 week of practice before games can occur and 3 weeks of tournament, assuming that we would have what looks like a regular season. This would only provide for 5 weeks of regular season for basketball. That's all I have. Thanks for the opportunity to present that.
Thanks, Kate. Any questions for Kate? All right, Wade.
Most of our issues have been addressed. The baseball coaches did go ahead and have a statement that they put on their website, and their president, Scott Holler, did get to me. And quite simply, they said they would appreciate the WIAA keeping the spring baseball season as regularly scheduled for their start and end date. That's already been determined. And obviously, their reasoning is that they've already been affected and canceled once by the pandemic. And they really don't want to lose participation in their sport. So if they went to the summer, they're afraid that they would make the families choose, obviously, between their jobs, vacations, club travel teams, and those are just a few of their issues. But the biggest reason is the low participation because of the travel ball situation. Remember, we did have summer baseball at one time, and the schools just kind of wilted away as the summer's programs came on. We have not had summer baseball for 3 years now, I believe, or this would have been a second year. They're also concerned about the rural communities across the state, that they would struggle to keep their programs alive for a summer season if they're pushed to the summer, as well as the commitments that some of those communities already have to the American Legion baseball. So generally it's the same thing. It's not as easy as it appears to switch the seasons. My concerns would be umpires. Obviously, a lot of our umpires also work summer youth leagues around the state, and we would have some trouble getting umpire availability as well. So a lot of our sports would be displaced if we were to go ahead and take our spring sports and move them to the summer. Obviously, football is involved in this. I'm not sure if it isn't the main reason that the discussion is taking place. And the football coaches did come up. I've met with them a couple times here, discussed with them their statement that was passed on to the board, so I won't read the whole thing. But unanimously, they have said that they would like to start no earlier than September 1st. Currently, they're supposed to start August 3rd, but they understand the position that superintendents are placed in and principals are placed in with the start of school. So their recommendation is for practices to start September 1st, to go down to a 7-game regular season, which would eliminate the 2 non-conference games, and it would allow us to have the conference games, 6 conference games, and a crossover for those smaller conferences. And that would be followed by a postseason determined by the WIAA board and the WIAA staff. The reason for going ahead and aligning the start of football practice with the start of school is to help reduce the exposure as classes resume. So they understand that, and we've gone over the study by Dr. McGuine multiple times about the level of depression and the mental wellness of athletes, and they believe that with the amount of anxiety and depression and the low quality of life scores that we've seen, that some return to normalcy would be very good in the fall for the sport of football. In addition to that, we'll have, the social interactions and getting the kids connected back to their school and teammates. This would reduce the number of weeks and games, obviously, but moving to the fall to the spring, they believe football is a fall sport, and they believe that it presents too many challenges, especially those with field conditions and the availability of the fields. Keep in mind that many of the football fields are used as soccer fields in the spring. And, while we have, upwards of 60 turf fields, most of those rural fields that have soccer are going to be now football and soccer. In addition to that, one of the things that people forget maybe is that the winter conditions and the spring conditions in the northern part of the state are not real suitable to playing baseball, much less moving football into that area. So they believe that it would be good to go ahead and maintain the football season definitely in the northern part of the state due to the weather conditions. If you started football on March 8th and your first game was the first week of April, there's still going to be snow on the ground, as we know, through our spring baseball experiences that we have there. So my concern is that if we move football into the spring, not only do we have snow in the northern part of the state, but we will also then introduce heat into a longer part of the football season. We have spent a lot of time on heat acclimatization in August, but we're then now moving football possibly into more exposure for that. In addition to that, and I can't recall off the top of my head, Dr. Walter did not talk about football, but as he and I have talked about football, the overexposure potential. If we have football in the spring and it's an extended season, doesn't get over to the middle of June or to the end of June, we are starting football again in 21, hopefully in the beginning of August. And that narrows that gap in between the 2 seasons. And you're going to have overexposure. So you could have more injuries and you could have loss of participation through that. So an abbreviation in the spring an abbreviated season in the spring is going to be a necessary piece of that, where you would have to maybe consider shortening up or the state championship tournament, or even eliminating it, because you want to lengthen that gap between the seasons there. So as far as starting in the fall, remember, the farther back we push the football season, the less flexibility we have. So if we start September 1st, whether the board decides to have a WIAA tournament or not at this point, if you need to stop practices and stop games for a week or 2, if you have a September 1 start date, you still have some time and some weeks to go ahead and adjust and be flexible. If you go ahead and move further into September, then there's less flexibility. And, obviously that's one of the concerns that I have. But that's a summary of baseball and football. And I have other thoughts in general, but I can do those when you ask for those.
Thanks, Wade. Any questions for Wade? Dave, I know that you've been talking with other state leaders. Any insight on to what some of the other states are doing, or any thoughts that you have?
Thank you, Eric. First off, to summarize from for the board, the executive staff's discovery and the critical analysis for all of the models that have come in. First off, I will assure you that we can make whatever the board determines fit onto a calendar. You know, that's simply working out dates and numbers on a calendar, and we can do that. I want to underscore that what the staff has shared have only come from the voices of sometimes coaches, sometimes parents, sometimes the student athletes themselves, sometimes our member administrators who have weighed in on behalf of one point of view or the other. But we can build any calendar to fit something. It's important, I think, that the board be mindful of if and when and how far we push into summer, that we are now then intruding upon the domain of other sport entities. The staff has pointed those other opportunities out, but you know, things like Legion Baseball, which are extraordinarily big and popular in parts of our membership, whether it's youth soccer or youth baseball, whether it's summer fast pitch. Those are other entities and organizations who have worked hard and for many years to build and provide their opportunities, and we will be intruding on those. I think Tom tried to point out very well that moving into summer, the availability of golf courses to schools and students at the loss of their regular, normal paying patrons, those are things to be aware of. But with regard to other members, yes, as the board is aware, we have weekly conversations, both with all of our 11 state Midwest colleagues surrounding us, from Nebraska to Kansas to Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. So we get together weekly to discuss changes and what's happening there. And we also have weekly Zoom meetings with all 50 state executive directors to update. What I will tell you is that all 50 states, including those in the Midwest, are all having these same conversations, raising the same questions and concerns, and sharing all of the ideas. What I can tell you right now is that based on yesterday's 11 state meeting here among the Midwest directors, is that all of the states are with the exception of Illinois. All of the other states are moving forward on time and as scheduled. Now, some of those states begin their fall sports seasons just a little bit later than we do here in Wisconsin because of their geography and climate. But by and large, they are all moving forward as planned. The conversations have centered around the fact that in other states, just like here in Wisconsin, there are hotbeds and hot communities for the virus. And in Nebraska, as an example, as in Iowa, Indiana, it is a local control matter. If they are able to go, they are going. In fact, in the state of Iowa, right now they are entering into their state baseball championships in the Boys Association. And I don't remember if that is 4, 5, 6, 7 days of state finals in the state of Iowa. And they have been playing both baseball and school softball in the Girls Iowa Association all summer long. The boys director reported that they had in the neighborhood of about 25% of the schools had to that were participating in in their baseball program had to, at one point in time or another, hit a pause button. But they are moving forward. Those that are able to move forward, and it's the vast majority of their member schools, are moving forward into their state championship week or weekend coming up at the end of this week. Illinois is the one exception right now. They have gotten swept up in a lawsuit and a restraining order, but that is leaving their season starts in a little bit of limbo until that legal proceeding is decided. But otherwise, they were among all of the other states that were looking to start on time and as scheduled. So at this point in time, around the Midwest, our current status, and that was, starting on time and on schedule, is certainly within the mainstream of the Midwest states. I am seeing some of the coastal states, California, as we all know, has adopted a plan similar to the Southwest Wisconsin proposal. They have, and that is what they are doing in California, and East Coast is seeing some other modifications, certainly in that hotbed corner of the Southwest, California, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico. We are seeing some other longer delays being pushed. In the Midwest, we are not as hot as some of those coasts, and so we're seeing more of an inclination toward on time and as scheduled, and adjust as we go forward.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave?
I guess I do have a question. This is Jennifer. Kind
Hey,
of goes
Jennifer.
back to the executive staff and their comments about the Coaches Association and everything. We're here to try and make decisions, and we're here to think about the kids and the opportunities that we can provide for them as an organization, and really give some guidance to our schools throughout the state. So with the Coaches Association, back to the other staff members, was the focus providing those opportunities with not worrying about state championships, or was there a big mix of we want the championships, or really we want something for our kids throughout the state? What came out of that? I know the WASDA kind of had a little bit of both on there, but it looked like more of just the opportunity from the district administrators. So any thoughts on that from the staff members or even Dave?
I will start on that one, Jennifer. And as we have chatted as an executive staff, we are beginning to transition away from the use of the term state championship. Absolutely, and of course, if we are able to provide that opportunity, we want to do it. However, in where we find ourselves right now, some of the states, many of the states, our recommendation is, we would advise against large multi-school events. We would advise against out-of-state travel or bringing schools into your community from out of state. We believe that we will go as far as a season and the virus may allow us to go. That might be to a championship. However, I think we are best off to look at how can we provide opportunities for kids to get together, give them those experiences, and go as far as we can to have a culminating event. I think it's pointless to try to project what we might be able to do in November, and certainly, gosh, in March. We simply don't know what it's going to look like 2 and 3 and 4 months from now. Our recommendation is we need to be open-minded to the fact that, the best we might be able to do is a regional championship or a district or divisional championship, if you will. Obviously, coaches, kids, parents, and others would like to go as far and as deep as they can to determine a championship. And I'm going to say it again, we would love to as well. But those things may not present themselves as either realistic or best practice when it comes time to begin offering that. One of the states on the 50-state call the other day said, it was Montana. And they're going to announce what the championships will look like. The culminating event will look like 30 days in advance of the end of the season. Doesn't pay to plan out much further than that. If there's other staff that have other vital topics, I think for the most part, or points, I think for the most part, coaches first off want to get their kids together.
I would echo that. This is Wade, and I would echo that for the football coaches. We spent quite a bit of time talking about getting the kids together and getting the kids the opportunities to be with one another, to get connected for their mental well-being, the opportunity to go ahead and get them with their coaches and with their teammates to be able to go ahead and play their sport. And, we emphasized practicing and getting together first so they can go ahead and they can model behavior. They've been getting their contact days in, and I talked to a coach yesterday, and he talked about how they've sectioned off their field into groups of 25 to meet their Dane County guidelines, that they've been able to mask up. They've been able to keep their physical distance and their social distancing, and our coaches have been proud of themselves, and I think they've done a great job, as Dr. Walters said. But their focus is on getting to practice first. Then, if they can get some games in, to get games in, to do those regionally and to get their schedule filled. Not everybody's going to be able to play. They understand that, but they would like their kids to get some competition with their local conference schools and to do that. The playoffs was as a low priority, I think. They understand that it's going to be difficult to go from Hudson to Bayport and Bayport to Middleton and so forth and so on in these times. And as Dave has talked about, we've talked about regional districts or an extra game that you play your conference game plus your conference schedule plus one. So to answer your question, Jennifer, I don't think it's a priority for playoffs as much as it is for those coaches to get back with their kids and to provide those opportunities to those kids so they can receive those benefits.
Jennifer, I have nothing additional to add other than that's exactly what I've heard from coaches in my sports as well. Their number one priority is getting kids back together. They're not even talking about tournaments. Everybody understands that we all need to be flexible and take things as they come and adjust as we need to adjust. But agree 100% with those comments made by Dave and Wade.
Jennifer, same thing goes here. Our focus has been on let's see if we can get things started, and when we can do that safely. We know how to deal with practice. We know how to deal with contests, but we have to monitor what the circumstances are at each of those local levels. Monitor and adjust and be able to proceed providing those during the season. If we're lucky enough to get down the road, and certainly our time, for instance, in girls golf might be extremely limited, but whatever it's provided, we can look at that and then determine later on how a tournament series might look should that opportunity present itself.
Same here, Jennifer. And I just think the coaches are focused on getting the kids together, and I think we'll have to find a way to be really creative as the tournament times roll around or as we get to that point. But, we're happy to do that. And I think the coaches are just focusing on the start rather than the finish.
We need to be thoughtful. When we, back in March, we're taking our basketball tournament to Green Bay. The outcry from members of the Green Bay community, they did not want 20 teams coming from across the state into their one community and then going back home. We have to be mindful of what our largest individual events like cross country and track and field might look like. We're bringing now kids from 500 member schools into a community, intermixing and going back out. So we need, and again, that is conversations for way down the road, and we will cross those bridges when we come to them. But I think I think it will serve us all better to be thinking of, if we are able to have some sort of a culminating event, what's the best we can make of it when that time arises. Right now, we want to get kids together with their coaches and get them going when we can and if we can. Eric?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Quick question for maybe Wade can help me with this one before we go to Wada. Some confusion, I think, with the risk levels across the state. In the advisory, in their guidelines, we have a high risk, a moderate risk, and a low risk. But the county in the DHS websites have counties listed as activity levels as high. Those don't necessarily correlate, do they? Because what I'm hearing from my public health up here is we're kind of in the moderate, but yet our county shows a high activity level. Would you, can you speak to that at all? Was it meant to correlate?
Basically, no, because we didn't, all of the health departments are using a different way to go ahead and categorize their risk. And when we developed the guidelines with the Sports Medical Advisory Committee, we have two different types of risk. The first risk is the environmental risk that you're talking about. What your county might say is your risk in your environment is high, therefore they're going to keep gatherings down to 10 people. Some might be in a moderate environmental risk, and that means that your gatherings can be larger. You might be up to 50 people where you can go ahead and gather. So that is the environmental risk. And then our sports are categorized as exposure risk. So when you have football and then you see that it's a high exposure risk because of the fact that the kids might be closer together and they cannot physically distance as well. But you have golf, which is a low exposure risk, meaning that the kids can physically distance and socially distance and they can maintain that. And they might be able to wear their masks throughout the majority of the competition. They might take it off for, teeing off, but they put it on as they're walking to their next, ball to hit. So that's the difference in there. And I think you're seeing that difference in your health department as well. They might have a different activity level, but in our guidelines, it's the environmental risk, what it is in your community, and what the risk is for them to go ahead and be infected. Then you have the exposure risk on if you have this gathering and you're in sport, your sport together, can you physically distance? And that's a low exposure. So that's where you see that list or those two different pieces in our guidelines. One is for practice and competition for the environmental. The other one is for competition and the exposure risk.
Eric, I would add that in my conversations with the 11 state leaders here in the Midwest, similar discussion arose, and the lack of uniformity from one health department to the next across their states, and those are conversations that are need to take place at a level beyond the WIAA. But they in other states are cognizant of it and are taking steps in those other states to, in order to help, to try to find a common language, a common understanding and vernacular, if you will. But it's not an uncommon problem or concern in other states as we're all navigating this right now.
And we've had a wonderful working relationship with the DHS, the DPI, and somewhat with the governor's office. So, Dave and I just had a conversation with the DHS, and we've worked together with the state DHS in order to develop those guidelines. And they've worked hard and with us, and we've gone ahead and collaborated with them. And I thought we did. It's been a great experience working with them.
Thank you. Thank you. Todd, do you have any thoughts from Wada?
Todd Sabrowski?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for including the Wada Executive Board leadership here today in this very important meeting and discussions that are going on. And the Wada board and exec board has been meeting weekly since the middle of March as this has all happened. And we've had Tom Safransky as our liaison there, who's been involved in all those meetings. And so, much like everyone here on the board, over the course of the last week or so, our WADA board and exec board's been inundated with emails, phone calls, text messages about what's next. And so I don't envy you your decision today, because I truly believe that no matter what we decide, there's going to be about 50% of the people who aren't going to agree with it, and there'll be about 50% who think that you're about to do the right thing. From Wada's perspective, the athletic directors of the state, we need a decision though today. I think the worst thing that could happen out of this meeting is that we postpone and decide to just wait to see what happens next. And the one thing I've heard pretty consistent from our membership is we need to know what to do and when to do it. Yeah, ADs by and large are very optimistic, very hopeful people. They're also very organized, as I'm sure the whole board here knows, because you all have an AD in your system. And so if you give us a date and you give us a calendar, whatever that might look like, we'll figure it out. Because our job is to provide an opportunity for our students in our systems to be involved. And as everybody knows through the studies that have been done, and Dr. Walters pointed out, it's vitally important for our student athletes to be involved. And so I would just say, again, thank you for having us here today. And I'm going to defer to Nathan, who's our president-elect, who serves on this board as our liaison. And I think he's got some prepared things he wants to share from our end of stuff. So again, thank you, Eric, for having us here, and Dave, and for inviting our whole Wada exec board to be able to sit here and participate as needed.
Thanks, Todd. Nathan?
Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Todd. Over the last couple of weeks, as many of you have, you've been reaching out to your members. We did the same thing, and we sent out a quick survey just to get a pros and cons list regarding, a traditional start, the truncated and Southwest plan, and then a flip season. And I just want to share some pros and cons from the traditional model and the truncated, because the flip season didn't have a lot of support for many of the reasons that the executive staff shared with you. But as a traditional model, it's easy for status quo, for officials, planning, families. Kids need it for their mental health. You have that 9th grade transition. It's the best option if school is out of the equation, and most time to allow for variations across the state and within seasons. Some of the cons, not a shared approach, rescheduling issues, athlete and coach health. Many feel it's unrealistic. It may impact the beginning of school, and then traveling between communities seems unwise. And as far as the truncated model, schools can start with less variables. There's delays and opportunities for the virus response to be understood. Hope for all seasons. It's a statewide approach. It could allow for local contact in the fall months prior to the official season dates. But like a couple of you have pointed out, some of the cons are fatigues, no breaks, the summer activities. And that's kind of how the truncated model came about. Is a couple of us looked at going into July thinking that might be unrealistic, and then trying to shorten it into similar time frame as we currently have with just shorter seasons. I guess I would echo what Todd said, and I think all of you are feeling that, or being looked at to provide direction for our membership. I think over the course of the last 5 days, there's been more conversations about delayed starts, whether that's delayed starts for football or delayed start for all fall sports, to allow schools to get back, or to allow schools to make a decision about education, and leave athletics kind of on its own island. Yes, we all believe it's very important. I don't believe there's plenty of district administrators that agree with that as well, but there's a hard decision to be yet made on the education piece. So, possibly delaying a start, definitely having a definitive calendar as to when decisions could be made along the way. I don't believe that the Southwest or truncated model, or which another plan should be thrown out, but I think it's a tool that you could have maybe down the road as we move through the end of July and into August. I know everybody wants a definitive hard start for the whole entire year, and I don't believe our leadership believes that's possible. I don't think our members believe that's possible, and I think that's what you have to grapple with, and I totally understand. Just another piece is that, if there is a temporary change, do we need to look at dual participation, additional contact days during the school year to make sure that we are engaging our kids and keeping them in our buildings versus losing them to club sports. And I know that was expressed by many. I think that's all I have for right now, Eric. I think Jeremy might have a couple other pieces.
Yeah, if I may, Eric, just quick. Dual participation is not a WIAA issue. That's a local control issue. If a youngster wants to, and I'm not positive, Nathan, if that's what you had meant when you said dual participation, there is not a WIAA rule that would prevent a youngster from, say, playing both football and soccer at the same time, or playing volleyball and running cross country. That's a local control thing.
Dave, I'll jump in. This is Todd. I think what we're referring to is if seasons were to be moved around, and as an example, we do have a rule, though, that would not allow them to play volleyball in our high school season and club at the same time.
That's correct, Dave. And that's what the Volleyball Coaches Association also had reiterated that I mentioned earlier. So they're specifically talking about playing on a club volleyball team during a high school volleyball season if seasons were shifted.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy, did you have a quick comment there?
Yeah, just a couple of things. And one thing, I really want to thank the board and the executive staff for the access of this meeting so people can directly hear the discussions that are going on. I think that's really going to help us as ADs, as we're the ones that need to operationalize whatever plans kind of come out. What I would advocate for even more specifically would be definite timelines for wholesale changes. And when decisions or announcements will be made, do it in a multifaceted and regular communication as we can along the lines of sport-specific guidance. Could you give 3 weeks prior to a season start date the decision of any season altercation or alterations? Maybe 3 weeks before the planned tournament series, could you make a determination of what that model is going to be going forward? And for those schools that can't have in-person contact, make coach contact days allowed by local control out of season during the school year. In our area, we've had a number of schools that have moved virtual. The conference that I'm part of will not be able to offer fall sports to make sure that the value intent of our education-based athletics is partners with our school delivery and, obviously focused on the community health and livelihood of our community. As we move virtual, we'll provide robust virtual opportunities, but with that in-person value, relaxing that rule to allow in-person contact for those schools that can't have competitions or in-person activities, and for those thousands of student athletes that'll be affected that way. And finally, as an organization, we're gonna message kindness and empathy and connection and support, and we really understand the difficult decision you as a board is gonna make. And to echo Dr. Walters' message, we'll wear a mask. So thank you all.
Thank you. John, Ashley, do you have any thoughts that you wanted to share quickly?
Thanks, Eric. This has been a really enlightening conversation. I don't have any direct comments to make. I'll defer if Mike, I know, and I just want to thank Mike for reaching out to our board of directors to get their opinions. Unfortunately, they don't all agree, which I don't think should come as a surprise to anybody on this call, because as a statewide organization, we've talked about hot spots and areas in which it's very difficult to imagine continuing forward, while in other areas of the state, we know that the incidence of the virus is not as high. So I can't add anything to the discussion other than I really, really appreciate the focus on our students' well-being and the impact that that can have on our communities and the connection between athletics and academics. And I applaud the WIAA and Dave's leadership on that. But that would be my only comment, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Is Mike Thompson on the call? Do we know? I have not seen them.
I don't think so, Eric.
Okay. So we'll move on from there and we'll go to the Board of Control. What I'd like to do here is I'd like to just quickly go around the Board of Control and just get feedback from your area. And I'd like to start with the, District 1 so that we can kind of get a feel for how it moves throughout the state and the thoughts that are coming from each region of the state. And then I'd like to ask the WIAA and Dave if you have a recommendation. And then I'd get into the discussion with the board on our thoughts on how we want to move forward. So with that being said, I am the District 1 rep, which is the northwest corner of the state. And so I am hearing some support for the Southwest proposal, some support for starting on time, a lot of support for just delaying the fall season. September 15th is a date that's thrown a lot around up here a lot. So I think a good majority of this part of the state would like to see fall sports run with just a delay after school starts. So with that, I'll move to District 2, and that's Scott, and that's the Northeast.
Okay, yeah, Eric, I'm a little bit different on that in our corner. I would say I did a little bit of a survey similar to Mike's, and 91% of the people surveyed don't want the fall sports to start on time. The others obviously do. There is a majority that would like to see us consider something like the Southwest plan. But then there's another big chunk, whether it's two different dates of delaying fall sports would be a preferred option too. And then there's a small chunk that says start on time and go ahead. And there's a small chunk that says cancel the season completely and start thinking about winter sports. So mine is majority is either delay or Southwest plan, but there is a small portion out there on the opposite ends of the spectrum too.
Thanks, Scott. We will go to District 3, which is Mike Bigley.
Thanks, Eric. As Scott mentioned, I did a real quick survey as well, and about 71% of our folks that responded in this area want to see a delayed start of some manner, broken down into, there was some support, about a third for the Southwest version, about a third for a September 15th start, somewhere in there. Much like you said. And then I just asked a simple, well, I think the other part of it is there was, as Scott said, a small chunk that would just cancel. So no real difference, maybe a little bit different in the numbers, but 70% to delay, not start on time, 30% to start on time.
Thanks, Mike. That is the west central portion of the state. District 4 is Dave Steepak, and that's the east central.
Hi, all. I've talked with many people, district members, commissioners, parents, even student athletes. There isn't one group that wants the fall sports season canceled. However, there is a mixture similar to what everybody else has said in regards to a possible delayed start of September 1st, possibly a delayed start to September 15th, a mixture of a delayed from a high-risk sport to a low-risk sport, keeping those low-risk sports business as usual and starting on time. And then there's also a mixture of school districts and my area of the state that want something looked at in regards to the Southwest plan. So, you know, a mixture of all things, but I think it's something that one thing is that nobody wants the fall sports to be completely canceled.
Thank you, Dave. District 5, which is the southwest corner. That's Willie Chambers.
Good morning. Just a little bit of history on this. This came out of a CISA meeting, the Southwest Plan, and we were talking about opening plans, and concern was shared about sports opening before school and what effect that would have on the ability of schools to open And I think everybody acknowledges the importance of athletics and co-curricular activities in general in education, but certainly didn't want any hindrance to whatever the plans are to open school. So anyway, in my district, of the 65 schools, I have heard or seen signatures from 44 of those, so 68% of them supporting the Southwest plan. I have certainly had a few coaches reach out to me, especially in the spring sports, not in favor of it because they're concerned with all the ideas mentioned earlier. I've also had one or two people talk about just canceling fall sports. Again, not because they don't believe in sports, they're just concerned about the safety of things with the number of cases of COVID rising right now, or perceivably rising right now. So, like I said, right now our area is about 68% saying that we should go with the Southwest plan, and a few supporting a late start. And then one or two have reached out and said just cancel fall sports. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. We'll move to the South Central, which is Bernie.
Thanks, Eric. Much in line with what Willie just said on the percentages are in my area. A growing number of schools in my region and in Dane County have gone to virtual school to start the year, first quarter at least. So there's too many. A growing number will not be able to participate at all or compete at all if we have a regular fall season. So there's a lot of support by me for the Southwest plan. And if not that, a delayed start, which would potentially give them some hope that things will get better and they would be able to compete. So that's where we're at in my area.
Thank you, Bernie. District 7, which is the southeast corner of the state, and that's Phil.
Thanks, Eric. You know, if you went by strictly the communication I had, it's pretty clear that people want fall sports to move forward. And that's from parents and other superintendents that I've discussed it with, athletic directors. Not completely unanimous, but about as close as you can get to it. I'm not naive enough to know that, or to believe that there are people on the opposite side of that as well. We have schools and districts that have gone virtual and have said there would not be athletics. So it's a pretty diverse thought of opinions throughout Southeast Wisconsin, but through the communications I have had, that's kind of the direction of where it went.
Thank you, Phil. Now for our reps, school board, Mike. You're on mute, Mike.
There we go. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. I took a survey of the WASB board, and as a whole, the ones that replied to me want to make sure that student safety is a big focus. Many are very interested in a delay start, say September 14th or 15th. One person mentioned that if we do have to shut down the fall season due to some mandate coming from the state, then they understand the need for that CISA 3 model or the Southwest model, compressing everything into the second semester. Yeah, look, for majority of the people, September 14th, September 15th, a delay start is what everybody was interested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about the delay, possibly back into the September 14th, 15th start date, or the CISA model as a fallback. You know, I did get contacted from some of our female athletes in the state, especially from our swimming, just really stressing they understand if we can't have everything fully in place, but they really want the opportunity. That's coming from some of our female athletes on swim teams. Other things that are coming up, especially from our small schools, are some of our small schools also have coaches that are teachers. What happens if the virus spreads? So similar to what we've been talking about here, if schools have to close or we go to virtual, what happens with all of that? But the biggest part is that delay and possibly the fallback to CISA as needed.
Thank you, Jennifer. Carl.
I work with a lot of the superintendents up in CISA 8. They were very in favor of the CISA 3 model or the Southwest model, pushing the sports or flipping it, moving it to the fall or the spring. But I do believe there's some that wouldn't mind it, at least a delay, but they're just looking for guidance where we're going from WIAA.
Thank you, Carl. And last but certainly not least, Paul.
Hi, yes. The people that I've been talking to and intermixing with, and recently in the last 24 hours, as many of you did, I had a lot of personal notes, emails, and things sent to all of us, and I had a few others that were just a little bit more representative of the non-public schools around the state. There's a very strong interest in having 3 sporting seasons. I believe we all want that, and not canceling any of them as a consideration. They would like them to be done in the regular order and not necessarily flipping the seasons, spring to fall, fall to spring. A few have said, get it going, regular start time, let's put it in motion. That wasn't a pervasive phrase, but it came up. A lot of people just said, take a few weeks of caution. Just see where things get closer to the school year, be it starting maybe all the sports 2 weeks late, maybe just football 2 weeks late and the others go, or just push it to like a general starting date for everybody, September 1. But they want winter and winter sports, normal start and end dates as possible, spring and spring, normal and start dates and end dates as much as they can, that's possible. So they really focused on keeping things as they are. It has more to do with just a potential delay getting into the fall sports. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Before we get into a discussion, Dave, does WIAA have a recommendation that you'd like the board to hear?
I have thoughts and opinions, Eric, whether or not the board would like to hear them. We are prepared to take our marching orders. If I had the magic wand and if I had the unilateral authority, what I would propose and recognize that I come from a position of looking to provide opportunity for young people. I don't say that lightly because I do recognize the struggles and the concerns of school leaders, and those are very real. They are undeniable. And for every point in argument, every one of us can raise a counterpoint in argument. A very good friend of mine who is also a school administrator explained it to me this way. He said, Dave, I'll be honest with you, my son is taking part in summer basketball. And I'm okay with that because as a family, I'm making that decision for my son and we are taking the precautions. I know what to do and we're doing the best we can, but it's a risk I'm okay assuming for my own child. However, when you ask me to take that responsibility for the children of 300 or 1,000 different parents, it presents and places on my back an entirely different enormity for me to have to wrestle with at night. And I understand that. When I look at the different proposals and the models that are presented, I think of, okay, so we're going to push and forge ahead with the fall. Well, you know what? We have just now rendered a sentence on thousands of young people in Dane County because that's where we are at right now. We have rendered, we've made it clear to the kids in the southeast part of the state, some of them disadvantaged young people who have no other opportunities for club or otherwise, that they have no other season or hope to look forward to. And that troubles me. So I am mindful of the lot of you all as school leaders. I am mindful of the predicament and the opportunities for young people. And frankly, in my mind, if I had that unilateral authority, I would say to you as the board, for those of our members who are able to sponsor fall sports, let's go. If you need a delay, fine. Let's go to September 1 or whatever the board determines, but let's go for those 30, 40, 50, 40, 35 counties who are not confronting this. Let's go with fall the best we can. For those members who are not able to go right now because of where the temperature is in their region, then let's go with something like the Southwest Wisconsin model. If we need to compress it, then let's compress it. What I'm saying is, we have a history here in our state of having both a spring baseball season and a summer baseball season. We've gotten it done. So what if we have a football season, the traditional season, and then we come back and figure out a calendar that allows those members who are not able to go in the traditional fall season an opportunity for a football season sometime in the spring. Let's provide as many opportunities for this membership to serve their kids. I say that now recognizing it is not that one size fits all that we heard in that CISA call the other day. And as you well know, there is a comfort in that blanket of uniformity, but this is not a normal year. And I think that if we limit ourselves, then we are limiting the possibilities and opportunities of providing these things to young people. In my mind, having dealt with this coronavirus and seeing the abrupt turns of it since March, when we left on a Monday night heading to our girls state championship with our last conversation with the CDC, hey, no problem. There's 1,000 cases and no restrictions on large gatherings. By Wednesday night of that week, you all know how it unfolded. And, first it began no crowds larger than 80. And then it began that we're not going to host at all. I think that trying to push this off until January is simply hedging a bet. We don't know what it's going to look like in January or December or March. And so I have been an advocate for, if there is a way to go and members that want to go, I would recommend that we attempt to go. There will be pauses and hesitations, no doubt. But if Iowa is the model, they have progressed through their summer baseball season into a culminating event over there. They had some teams that had to hit pause. Some were able to come back. Some were not because they missed a tournament game and had to move forward. But that would be my recommendation to the board. Do our best to accommodate the concerns that you all are hearing and you all are having as school leaders. Assign the task and the challenge to this staff to run duplicate seasons if need be, for those members who are able to go now and those members who cannot go until later in the year. If you need to delay the start, delay the start.
Thank you, Dave. Questions, discussion from the board, thoughts, other questions that you have?
Eric, it's Carl. I've got a question. When WIAA put the summer protocols in for teams to come back and start working with their, at their school facilities, have we gotten a lot of feedback? I know Wade touched on it a little bit, but have we gotten feedback how those have gone with the schools? Because if the protocols are working during the summer, I would think the protocols would work during the school year as well. Just a question if anybody's got some feedback for me.
Carl, we did talk to Dr. Walter yesterday, and we do anticipate that we are going to transition those summer guidelines into fall guidelines. In addition, he's going to go ahead and work with his infectious diseases department at Children's of Wisconsin hospitals to go ahead and develop guidelines on how you would deal with a positive. We know that you isolate them and you ask them not to come back, but how you would go ahead and deal with that on a team basis and exposure basis. So we're working on those guidelines for the fall. I've heard positive feedback from those guidelines. As you saw in the survey, there was only 21 schools out of the people who did go ahead and offer summer contact. And they said that those kids were modeling behavior and doing an awesome job. You know, when you have the high school kids and they know these are the factors you have to do in order to participate, they will cooperate with you on that. And so when they ask kids to mask up, to wash their hands, to disinfect the equipment, I've only heard positives from ADs on how they've been able to get their weight rooms efficient and effective, how they've been able to go ahead and adjust and have those kids and the coaches go ahead and meet those goals, because they know if they don't meet those guidelines, they can't go ahead and continue. So my experience has been that they've been positive. I'm not sure if Nathan and Todd and Jeremy would have more insight on that, or Dave.
Our staff has received numerous accounts from our member schools, and it goes back to what Dr. Walter referenced at the beginning of this. And while the Water membership is on this call, kudos to the membership, because again, we've gotten numerous accounts from athletic directors around the state who say that they have implemented those summer guidelines with success. And that includes some of those schools that have had to shut down temporarily their summer contact because of COVID cases. They followed the guidelines. They were able to hit the pause button and restart. So it's coaching contact days. It's also weight room time. And again, a lot of success stories in following those protocols. So kudos to the membership again for implementing those and taking them very seriously for student safety.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Dave, can I ask you a couple questions on your proposal?
Yes.
First of all, if you provide 2 fall seasons or to that extent, how would you impact the pushing back of spring sports by doing that then, or how would that look? And then secondly, if we push back the delayed start for fall sports, would you think we would do it for all sports or look at each sport individually?
Both very good questions, Scott. And again, my opinion, and from this perspective, we understand that there are certain sports that are low risk, golf, tennis, cross country. You know, in some of the states, they are requiring cross country runners to mask up at the starting line, and after 100 yards, they can, you know, or whatever, 50 yards, as soon as the field starts to spread out, they can lower their mask. They will raise it again as they're coming across the finish line. The opportunity to get kids going, there are some sports that certainly can. If it is best and better for members in your minds to delay all, then you know, I think that people would be happy and glad to know that at least we are going to give it a shot, if it's delayed or not. In my opinion, there are some sports that certainly could go, and so it's you know, probably a unique or individual or regional preference for, can we start some, or should we all be delayed at the same time and treated equally because of football? A lot of the things that we talk about, we find to be football centric, and we need to be mindful that there's a lot of other students involved in activities above and beyond just football. Scott, help me with the question about the dual season thing again.
If you're going to move the fall, like give kids the opportunity that can't go in the fall, if they move to spring, what does that do to the spring sports? If Stratford is going to have fall sports, then do our spring sports start as usual, or do we push back spring for everybody? How do you see that working?
Well, you know, I think that the good news would be if it was a model that was adopted, We certainly have time between now and January to figure out exactly some of those questions and find some of those answers, get some membership input. As we have chatted informally here in the office, we have said, well, you know what, we come to January and we find out that all of a sudden, things are better. We are seeing improvement. I don't want to limit if there's a school that says that may have originally said, we're going to this condensed half year, January to June, July model. But now we think we can run track in the traditional season. What I'm advocating for is as much flexibility and as much creativity. And I don't have all of the answers. If that is a model that captures your interest, I would recommend that the board say, staff, by August or September meeting, you come back with that plan, but we are going to create this option and opportunity, because we're not going to cut out the kids in the South Central, Southeast, or whatever part of the state might be under a more restrictive climate right now. And this staff will build it and create that opportunity. It may, and the question depends on how much of a regular season do we want to have in the spring? Do we want to have a tournament, a culminating event opportunity that would determine what that calendar looks like? We have clearly heard concerns about extending too far into July. We know Legion, we know Fast Pitch, we know those other things. And so I think the challenge would be to look at how we might best modify in order to reduce as much conflict as we might and engage as many kids as we might, hearing all of the other concerns that have been shared. I can't tell you that we have thrashed around a number of questions. I'm certain that they are not all of the questions right now and not having all of the answers right now. But if we went in that direction, by the time it needed to be operationalized, I'm confident that we would have been able to address and resolved most of the concerns that we will hear.
Thank you.
Wade, question in regards to August. If there's a delay, can you give me give us an idea of what August would look like?
You're on mute, Wade.
Wade,
A lot of people would like to do that for me, I guess.
Do you want the calendar shared, Wade?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
And which, Dave Steepbeck, which option were you talking about there?
I'm looking at if there's an opportunity to delay, and it could be a delay of September 1 or a September 15th delay for some or possibly the high risk sports or possibly all sports.
Right, and Steph has that calendar up there. The first calendar that you're looking at is all of the sports. They would start there in September 1. Obviously, football is the first one. The first 2 weeks, we have acclimatization, so it would be practice. There would be 7 weeks or 7 games potentially, and then 3 rounds of tournaments before the state championship, or as Dave called it, a culminating event. Boys and girls golf, there is starting on time, as is swim, and they would, swim has 1 week of practice. And notice that the volleyball, the cross countries are already starting, 2 weeks later in August. They all have 1 week of practice, so their first contest would not be until the week before school. And that's what that would look like. If we delayed them all, this is a calendar of delaying them all to a September 15th start date. In football, that means that you would have 2 weeks of practice. Your first game would not be allowed until October. I think that's October 4th, Thursday. And then if you're going to have 3 rounds of tournaments, you would only have 5 conference games. Or you would eliminate the tournament and you would be able to have 7 conference games and possibly an 8th game. You'll see the effect, though, that it has on girls golf, girls tennis, and girls swim, because it really truncates their season. So you're going to have, in golf, you can have 14 matches, but you would only have 2 weeks to get them in because their golf regional is actually right away and on September 30th. So that's the problem with going ahead and starting on the 15th for all sports, because you're affecting the girls' sports a great deal. In the fall, the girls would only have 2 weeks of contests, and in the spring, the boys would have the regular season. So that really is something that I think is an important piece to keep in mind if we're talking about delaying sports. If we go to football only on September 1, and that's the one that the model that the coaches have proposed. You have 2 weeks of practice from September 1st. Your first game is going to be the third week of September. You can still get your 7 games in, and the other sports would start on time, and we could progress with those. I think the last calendar that Stephanie had was delaying them all till September 1st, and once again you can see the truncation. You have 4 weeks of the girls golf and girls tennis. You'd have 5 weeks. Football, you would be down to the 7 games plus the 3 tournament games. And that you can see the effect of what you would have on cross country. The T's again are where you have your tournament events. So you would still be able to have, it looks like 6 weeks of your regular season and then be able to go into your tournaments. So that's what it would look like. I know you asked specifically about August. I think we had one more model, Stephanie, where they all started, I think. Did you have that model in there?
Well, Wade, if you could, I'm sorry to interrupt on that, but Stephanie, if you can pull that one back up and look at if we all start September 1.
Okay.
Can you share, Wade, the WIAA guideline in regards to August? If we start September 1, there is no contact and
Correct.
Going to talk a little bit about that?
Right. There is no coaching contact. I'm sorry, Dave. There is no coaching contact allowed for football after August 1st. So that would be a dead period for football. And there is no coaching contact after August 8th for all the other sports because the board did give relief to that piece. So you won't have coaching contact or contact with the student athletes as a school sport from August 10th through August 30th. That would be a 3 weeks dead period for all sports.
But the possibility of strength training and speed and conditioning for all kids is an option.
Correct. You would still have your open gyms according to schools, and weight training is an open gym, so that would still be allowed by WIAA rules. And your fitness training or speed training, that is also an open gym. So as long as it's open to any and all interested students, they could do that period where you could connect with the kids.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Steph.
Wade, I don't know if you can articulate or if somebody can articulate what's the reason for a delay, because I think there's been a bunch of different reasons thrown out of why a delay would be considered. I don't know that Dr. Walters gave any information that by delaying sports is going to help anything with mitigation of the virus, or if it's a time thing of giving. The one thing I heard that all schools, or that giving schools time to focus on getting school started without sports, without having to deal with the sports piece, then I think that's a different consideration on timelines than if we're looking at something medically driven, because then maybe it's individual sports. But if it's about waiting, then I think all sports go together. So I think the reason to delay, if there is a good reason, matters for that decision.
I can speak to football, Phil. The football coaches want to get their kids together. The football coaches want to play games, and they want to do it in the fall. They're worried about if they go to the spring that it'll interfere with the baseball and with the track kids. And so they want to play in the fall, and they want to play, and they want to get the kids together. So the main reason for saying we can go with a delay is so people can have confidence that we can do this properly, as you're seeing in the summer contact period, that people can go ahead and be comfortable with the kids getting together. It is the reason for it is to allow the superintendents who are uneasy with the early start or the on-time start to give them time to head and focus on getting into school. So it's trying to eliminate one of those obstacles there where we might have schools that don't want the kids in early and are fearful that if the kids do get infected or do turn up positive, that they would have to shut their school down. So the coaches are, I guess, compromising in order to go ahead and let those people who have concerns about starting school on time not to worry about whether or not the football team is going to come in with a positive and they might have to delay their school start according to their health department. I hope I've articulated that well, but that's I believe what the reasoning is.
Thanks, Wade. I'll speak to that a little bit too. A lot of schools, especially up here, are planning to start in person, and they don't want, they believe that if they have to go virtual, it's much better that they've had at least some time with kids to get them prepped, to get them connected before they end up having to go virtual, and they don't want some of the sports to interfere with that. And obviously they feel the high risk sports are the most likely ones to interfere with that. So that would be your football and your volleyball, and therefore the delayed starts for some and not as much of a delayed start for other, I think, are potentially reasonable.
I have a question about the girls golf and the other sports that were going to be impacted. The question or the comment came up that there was the tournament at the end of September and the girls and golf would only have so many weeks. Is that something that can be adjusted if there's truly a delay vote that goes through? Can't all that be looked at and adjusted to meet some sort of tournament for those kids if we're going to be doing that?
Jennifer, just to help you out with that a little bit, it is weather conditions that we have to start looking at when it comes to mid-October. We've already run into those with delays and various issues that you have in dealing with golf courses outside. I'd also add tennis because the majority of those regular season, subsectional and sectional meets are all held outdoors. Some are able to be moved indoors when facilities allow for tennis. But golf is one that it is very difficult. And the coaches will be upfront with you. Starting even on September 1 creates a very difficult scenario for girls golf to really take place. If that were a September 15th start, it would be virtually impossible for the season really to get rolling. And there isn't any opportunity in looking at this for the spring. If we take a look at those models you saw starting in early March, we aren't looking at the likelihood of weather conditions being any better for the girls at that point. So anything that can be done to help them would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And then, I guess other considerations, I know we're talking about possible delays, but, if golf, cross country, swimming were allowed in the fall and move the other sports to spring, I know those are a lot of other options and that's something that we've truly looked at, but has the board, or I'm sorry, the executive staff looked at anything like that? Or Dave, your comments on that type of a model?
Yes, we have, the staff have vetted, I think, every possibility that we've been able to identify and that we have been able to learn of from other states. We have given our best efforts to make an honest evaluation and assessment of that, and I was of the impression that staff was responding to that very question, Jennifer, in their, here's the pros and cons to every one of these ideas.
Thank you.
Eric, can I speak to the delay quick?
Okay, Willie, and then we'll go to Mike.
Okay. When I was in the CISA-3 meeting and other meetings down here, you said it very well as far as why the delay. I also believe, and I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes here, but the other piece that came out of that is if we start school and sports on the same day, and there is an issue, it's really hard isolating where that issue comes from. So a lot of the people that I've been talking to if that delay is where we end up, the September 15th would more align to what they're requesting to give us time to get school started and identify where problems in our protocols may be.
Thanks, Willie. Mike Bigley.
Just maybe a kind of a follow-up question from Jennifer's question regarding girls golf. Part of, I guess, the question I have as we go forward is a lot of our discussion on delays seems to focus around still continuing with the state tournament in its traditional format and timeframes. I understand girls golf. I understand, on the outside piece of that. It seems to me we maybe need to start breaking these down into different questions. If we're going to continue with a state tournament series in its traditional format, we have some time constraints. Are there flexibilities if we don't run in that traditional format to provide even another week or 2 weeks for girls golf to play matches and other things, and perhaps regional events or district level events or something like that? And I don't mean school district, I mean our districts. I think, maybe that's some of that breakdown that we need to start talking about. Am I correct or am I completely off base?
Mike, you are completely correct, and that's the trade-off. I mean, depending on when we start, it determines. There are some things that we can't control when it must end, and one of those is weather. And as we go forward, is the primary focus going to be on getting kids to play and do what we can for the tournaments? Or that culminating event. Get away from talking about tournaments. We can't promise that that's going to happen or what it's going to look like. If it can, super. That's how the WIAA survives, is on gate receipts. But the focus, we hope, is on participation more than crowning champions necessarily.
This is Todd from Wada's perspective. I hope I'm not out of line chiming in here on this question, but our membership, by and large, would support 100% what Dave just said, and that we would much rather, at least from the AD's perspective, we would much rather have our student athletes participating and have that extra couple of weeks to participate than compete for state championships. State championships should be based on a level playing field across the state, and that's just not going to be possible in the current environment. So I'll speak for the ADs of the state. I think we would be happy to have those extra couple of weeks as they get built in. And if the opportunity is out there to have some kind of postseason event play, whether it's regional, sectional, or just a one-off, because I think the ADs of the state would be very, very happy to be able to figure that out.
The only, Mike, the only precaution and board that I would hasten to add is that we simply want to be mindful of or have terrific and defendable explanation if we are doing something different for boys than girls. In particular, I mean, we all know that reality. So the idea of thinking it out, that we come as close to identical and equal as we can.
And Mike, I would just pigtail on that as well. There is support. We can figure out what to do. The issue is limiting the girls to that 5 weeks is the element there. Unfortunately, all too often, cold weather and so forth, especially in northern Wisconsin, end that girls golf season rather quickly for everybody. And we just want to make sure that we're being equitable for them in providing an appropriate season and one that where they can accomplish something, some way.
Okay. I guess I'd like to throw out an idea here for the board. Kind of just based on what I'm hearing from everybody, the idea of a delay for the fall seasons. The delay would be a September 7th start date for your high risk or your risk sports, your football, your volleyball, your soccer. That gets us after school has started, which superintendents are asking for. but it doesn't push it all the way back to the 14th. But then maybe an August 17th start for swimming, cross country, golf, and tennis, because I do believe that they can all be run safely. I also believe that most schools in the state should be able to run those because of the way they are structured. And that also puts it before school starts, so there isn't that direct conflict with the starting of school. But then for those schools that can't run football or volleyball, that they maybe work as a conference, an area, a region, whatever it may be, to move, if they decide to move their spring sports or their fall, those sports to the spring. And that would affect then their spring sports, but only theirs. For those schools, all the schools that were able to run, the spring sport is normal. It meets that delay. If everything was going to be cleared up and ready to go by December, then I think moving everything and waiting would be an idea. But I don't think we're going to have everything cleared up. I do think that if we don't offer stuff, that somebody else will. I spoke again with public health up in my region, and they feel more comfortable with us running it, even though they probably like to not see it happen. They understand the need for it and for kids, but they also know that somebody else will run it if we don't. And so I think something along those lines is going to satisfy most schools and give kids, I think, the most opportunities, and that's what we're trying to do. So thoughts, Dave?
Eric, if I may add to that, just for some added clarification of the conversations that we have had in this office. I know, for example, from yesterday's meeting with the 11 state directors, Missouri is not allowing athletics for those kids whose schools are opening virtually. I know that we will likely have some of our own members who are in fact opening virtually, and I shared with the group yesterday that here in Wisconsin, our recommendation would be that if you are opening virtually and you still want to allow your teams to assemble, your call, and we would say absolutely yes, they can do that. School is still going on. It's in a different style and manner of delivery of that instruction, but school is going on. And if you are in school and you have full-time students that want to get going, by all means, that would not be an issue this year with WIAA. They are your students. You are providing them instruction, albeit virtually. And in our internal conversations, I think it was Phil who originally shared that idea that, well, at least then if our teams are assembling and we are going virtually, the kids will not come back and infect and disrupt the rest of the student population and disrupt the instruction that is trying to take place.
Eric?
And Dave, can I make a clarification on that, please? Because, when we're talking about virtual education, they have to be virtually educated through the school as a full-time student of their school. So this doesn't open up virtual education for kids who are open enrolled out of your district. It is if your district has virtual education in your district provided 100% by your district and so forth and so on. So it's not changing the rule of eligibility. It is going ahead and just allowing a school that provides virtual education to allow their students to compete and participate.
And Eric, I did create a new calendar based on what I think I heard you say. If you'd like me to share my screen at some point, let me know.
Sure. Thoughts from the board, questions, other ideas?
Eric, if I can just share a couple thoughts. I mean, when it comes to the virtual piece, when it comes to anything, I think we need to have sports and we need to have them. I'm not personally, I look at it and say I'd rather have sports start before school does, because once school gets going, there's going to be plenty of other decisions and work and considerations to be had by us as superintendents and principals. I'd much rather get some of those things figured out like we are right now during contact days, but have the sports start, all of them, whether it's a week before, but I would prefer not to delay and do it after a week after we're trying to get schools up and running. That's going to be a big pull. But I think the equity piece is really critical to me. We have, and it's been mentioned a little bit, if there's going to be fall sports, without a doubt, in Wisconsin. And I think there's people probably listening to this right now with their email ready to go to fire off and say, let's start soccer club, let's get volleyball, let's have all the club sports. And I know football is a consideration out there too. I've had those conversations. There will be club football if we're not doing it. And we end up, again, not only educationally have our underprivileged and underserved kids been left behind, we do it again in sports if we end up canceling or removing that opportunity. So I would even go a little bit further and recommend that even for the teams that under Dave's plan, and I like what you're talking about, but if a volleyball team goes and says, we're going to give it a shot this fall, and for some reason something occurs and at some point in time they're not able to continue, that they're allowed that opportunity in the spring to restart. I don't know if there's a deadline, a 2-week or 5-week, whatever it is, but just that we do everything we can, because I think, I look at the WIAA, and I don't think the role of the WIAA should be to cancel sports or get in the way of what I think is local control, and the ultimate local control comes down to parents making the decision, knowing the risks. WIAA is not talking about eliminating football, when we know for the past 10 years that narrative has been it's bad, right? But everybody knows the risks, and I think it's the same thing here, and we got to trust our parents to make their own decisions. And I think no matter what, we've got to have seasons built in and move forward and give those opportunities. And I strongly feel if we're virtual, that's probably the best argument to keep sports going, is if everybody's virtual, because those kids are not, they're a small cohort of kids. They're not interacting with that student body. So my thought of I'm okay with the delay. I can buy into it. I'm not sure I'm sold that we really need to, but I know other people feel that way. I just think the delay, we should consider starting prior to the school year.
Hey, Eric?
Yep.
I think, somebody's going to have to do it, so I'm going to make a motion here, and if that's okay with you, maybe it needs to be divided out a little bit, but I think I'm making a motion that I like how you stated that the girls' golf, tennis, and swim would start on August 17th. And football, volleyball, and soccer would start on September 7th. And I would also like to give the flexibility to the staff to allow for flexibility for people that can't participate.
And cross country is included, Scott? And
Country.
Yep. Sorry, I forgot one.
What's the start date on cross country, Scott?
August 17th.
17th, I think it was in Eric's proposal. So
I'd second that motion.
Could I go ahead and share my screen just so you could see that calendar?
that'd be great.
Does this accurately reflect what you said? So August 17th, we've got golf, tennis, swim, boys and girls cross country. The week of September 7th, we've got football, boys soccer, girls and boys volleyball.
Yes.
I did not make any adjustments on the tournament side of things. I left them as is.
I think the length of seasons and everything might need to be something separately looked at, because that's one reason I said earlier for golf is once the frost starts hitting the golf courses, I don't know how much they're going to let kids out on the course too. So I think that's something we need to be mindful of.
Scott, so I'm clear then, the second part of that motion was to guarantee for those schools who were not able to start in the fall that second semester alternative, and to bring that back to you without putting words in your mouth. Was I clear in that understanding?
To give the staff the flexibility to do that, yes, and whether it's August or September to see what that looks like, I think that's a good place to start.
But the important element of it is that you are saying there will be fall, winter, spring opportunity in the second half of this year for those members who would require that.
Yes.
And I just want to point out that in there, and Stephanie will fix that. Football, we will not move back the tournament to December. We would end, those sports on the same date that their tournament would end on. So, you know, in football this year, the state tournament would not be in December, obviously. The last day of football would be November 22nd. And I did say that, you know, football coaching contact, Dave Steepak, 8 player does end the same time as all other sports. 11 player is the only one that ends August 8th.
Wade, so something like is shown right now with 3 levels of playoffs ending on the week of November 16th?
Yes, very good. That's what it would look like.
Okay.
My question is, Scott, is that what you intended for your motion?
I thought we would I was more concerned about the start of the seasons. I thought maybe we could do the seasons. I mean, I agree. I don't know if we really need to worry about having a state tournament, Phil. I think we need to figure out if it's going to be a conference play, but I don't think we should go past the where the season ended for the sport by each sport. I think we can look at each sport individually for the length of whether it's going to be regular season or a district-wide tournament or what have you.
If I can, Eric, can I go back to Phil's question? Because I really like that idea of, with this flexibility that Scott is asking the staff to provide or prepare for us, we could create, if I'm understanding correctly, we could create a window where if 2 weeks into a season somebody got shut down, they may have a second semester opportunity, Dave?
I think I think there's a couple of things. Yes, Mike, I think there's a couple of things critically important. If this is approved, then in relative short order, I think we need to come up with some sort of timeline for members to notify us. Are you going to take a run at fall? Are you going to delay until spring? But also, at what point, let's say we get going and at some point we need to hit pause or the plug is pulled entirely. At what point can we allow those who started off in fall to jump into spring? Again, looking for maximum opportunity, but much like the gender equity consideration, I think the competitive balance, the level playing field also needs to, at some point, potentially come into play. If I've got 3 football games under my belt plus several weeks of practice and now, you know, events occur and we have to stop, is it appropriate and justifiable to say, well, now you go get the rest of your, you know, games in the spring season? There will need to be, in my opinion, a point in time where, you know, we are able to let changes be made, but at some point in time, now it crosses a threshold of that equitable competition, if you will. And you know, you had what you had, and that's the end of your fall sports season.
Okay, thank you. And I guess going back to this, Scott, were you thinking then that we may come back with a second action item that deals perhaps with tournaments or something like that, or end of the year scenarios? Is that what you were thinking when you made the motion?
In my mind, yes. I don't know that we need to say, you know, I don't know. I think we just get the start of it going, and now let's talk about the regular season or tournament series. I agree with Dave. I don't think tournaments should really be a high priority right now. I think giving kids the opportunity to play is our biggest priority. You know, so I'm open to that discussion, but I don't think we should go past in the fall where the season would have ended.
Now, Scott, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I don't mind running tournaments to the extent we can. There's 19 of us here that like to work and like to eat. But it doesn't need to be, you're absolutely right. We need to get out of that mindset that there's no point in having a season if we can't find a champion. Absolutely wrong in education-based athletics. I would ask if our parliamentarian, Brent Jacobson, has any advice, if the board, or if you are hearing anything that you would caution the board on, Brent, with regard to any motion.
Hi, Dave. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. From what I'm hearing, nothing that I would caution the board on. Obviously, the best thing to do is walk out of here today with absolute clarity on what is passed, if anything. But from a clearly parliamentarian standpoint, I don't have any concerns. What we have a motion and a second on the table, and we're right now continuing discussion. If there comes a point when there is no further discussion, the vote can be taken. It's a majority vote to pass. Anyone can offer amendments to the motion on the table, and then the amendment needs to be taken up first by majority vote to see if it passes. But if there comes a point when discussion is finished, the vote can be taken. I think everybody is interested in discussing this as much as possible. However, if anyone wants to close discussion on the motion to not allow further discussion, then it needs to pass by 2/3 vote. So I hope I made sense. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So clarification, Dave. If schools or conferences, for that matter, choose to right away or have to go to the second plan you're talking about, the fall sports in the spring window, is the plan to have that so that students that are maybe involved in volleyball don't have to choose between the end of their basketball season / beginning of their softball track season, whatever that may be?
I believe that staff would put together a calendar, Willie, that would do its best to avoid conflict. But I think that that can and will be an ongoing conversation that we would bring back to the Board of Control. And there may need to be, depending on when you want to see all of this start and end and how deep into the summer you want to go, some guidance and concessions that will need to be incorporated. At this minute, I can't tell you, unless the board directs, set that season up so there are no conflicts. There may be some overlap of a week or wherever, and and I know as an athletics director, when I had those sorts of things, I needed to work that out between the coaches, the student athlete who is, in one sport right now, when can they join their other, the athlete, coaches, and parents, and I would work that out. But if your direction as a board is build something to eliminate any and all conflicts, we can certainly do that if that's our marching orders. But if we want to maximize an opportunity for each of those sports seasons in a condensed calendar, then I would anticipate there might be some overlap that might affect some of the kids in the preceding sports season.
Okay, so my comment, I just want to be sure I'm clear here. What, in essence, I'm hearing us say is there's a motion on the floor. If schools can't participate this fall for whatever reason of going in their community, they can do the CISA 3 model that is in front of us also. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding?
I think that, Jennifer, I would suggest that the board has said to the executive staff to come back to you with a CISA-like model. It might not be the exact one, and actually in Mr. Wagner's authoring of that and conversations since, the CISA Southwest Wisconsin model provided an example of, and I did not interpret it to be a rigid document. So I just want to clarify, the answer is yes, but it might not be the rigid and exact CISA model that we bring back to you as our best recommendation, but it will be up to you to have that final say.
So Dave, being
Willie, is that fair?
Yep. Being part of those original conversations, I do not believe that was rigid at all. It was just a starting point. And obviously you guys have more insight than we do. So yeah, I would agree.
Dave, this is Carl. I got a question. So say we start, our start date is September 7th for the high impact sports. Say there's a school district or a few school districts who are not allowed to start sports because of the area they're in. But say September 21st, things get cleared up and they were allowed to start sports. Could they get into the fall schedule at all?
My answer would be yes, absolutely. Understanding, they can't recapture the time that they missed, and we're not going to extend beyond. But understand what we have been advocating for. This is a year where let's do our best to find a way. There absolutely will come times and issues when a firm answer needs to be given. No, I'm sorry, we can't, or those sorts of things. But goodness sakes, in my mind, that doesn't need to be necessarily right now. And if we want to do all that we can to preserve hope and provide an opportunity, let's look for as many reasons and opportunities to say yes until we can't. Carl?
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Dave.
Hey, Dave or Brent, I want to ask a question on the motion. Does that need to be specific to this school year only? Like, should my motion have been for the fall of 20? So we're not making a broad sweeping of, that this might continue. I mean,
I would suggest
that's what I wanted to. That's what I wanted to say, but I don't. If we need clarification on that, or
I would suggest yes, to make it clear that these are, as we've all known, extraordinary times, and what we're talking about are some extraordinary measures. Not ideal if they don't need to be. We had uniformity in structure the way we have run for a long, long time, and it has worked well as a membership. But right now, our membership across our state is experiencing this thing entirely differently in the opening of school. And so let's do what we can for this year only. If we need to adjust again a year from now, then we will look at the landscape a year from now. But in my mind, your recommendation was specific to this year, and I think would be appropriate for you to identify that and have it seconded again.
Yeah, is that all right, Brent, if I just amend it to say for the fall of 2020?
Hi, Scott. If you've made it clear on the floor here, I don't think you need to do a formal amendment. And for a second, that was the equivalent of a point of information where someone has asked for clarity on your motion. And I think you made it clear that was your intent. So as long as everybody understands that, that motion can be read again when it's time for a vote with you stating that specifically, but it doesn't need to be a formal amendment with a new second.
Okay, thank you.
Assuming that Dave had the same understanding. I believe, Dave, you were the second.
Absolutely.
Okay, then thank you.
Dave Steveback was the second.
Yes, correct. And Scott, just wanted to double check on that, just to make sure. Your motion was to delay the start of high-risk sports to September 7th, and the starting date for low-risk sports is August 17th. And then the other part of it was going to be if a school cannot meet the starting dates or during that normal fall season, then they would be having the opportunity to move their fall season for that sport or sports to another time during the 2021 school year, correct?
Well, yeah, well, in a nutshell, yes, but to give the executive staff the flexibility to create that opportunity for schools that can't participate in the fall.
Correct, okay.
Eric, I want to propose an amendment, and whether or not there's any support for this at all, I feel really strong about it. And what I spoke about earlier, that for those high-risk sports, that we bump that up 2 weeks and they start a week before school starts. And my thought process is that I think if we're thinking that starting sports after the school year starts is going to be less of a distraction to our efforts to get school going, I think that's just my opinion. I think it's a mistake. I think if we can start sports before the school year, we're going to be much better off. And probably more importantly, our kids have been waiting a long time. And for those 3 sports to make them wait longer, when I haven't heard anything from public health officers or from Dr. Walters or from any other medical advisors to say it's a good reason to delay it that long. If it's just about the other components, of getting school started without distractions of sports or without having to address the sports issue, I get that. I mean, I'm in that same boat, but I feel pretty strong that our kids need to be back. And if we can get 2 weeks earlier, I'm all in. If we can do it safely and we can still get our schools going. So that's a long-winded amendment, and there may not be a second.
I just want to clarify that, Phil, I thought what I heard you say was have those low-risk sports start earlier. And currently the calendar does show that. Let me just show my screen one more time and make sure I've got this correct with what the amendment on the table or with the proposal on the table is. This is showing golf, tennis, and swim starting on the week of August 17th. Is that accurate, what the proposal currently is, the motion?
That would be, I don't know. Scott, is that what you?
That's the motion is correct. On your
My proposed amendment is to bump up the 4 other sports
24th
to August 24th start.
So soccer and the 2 volleyballs, to move those to the 24th, Phil, is that what you were saying?
And football.
And football. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the calendar shows what we're talking about correctly. Thank you.
Phil, I would say this. I'm going to stick with the September 7th, I think, but I would prefer our August 24th as to September 1st because I think there's going to be enough to deal with on that first day of school. So my original thought was the August 24th, but I think September 7th gives everybody a little extra time. And I understand what you're saying too, with the kids have waited a long time. Let's get them going. So, I'm flexible, but I'll stick with the motion for now.
This is Brent, if I can just chime in. So since Scott has indicated he's not withdrawing the original motion, we do have a amendment proposal on the table, I believe from Phil. So we would need someone, if anyone, to second that amendment. Then there can be any further discussion, and then a vote would need to be taken on that amendment to see if it's successful.
So is the suggestion we get a second and vote on it, and then if it passes, fine. If it doesn't pass, then we move back to the regular motion?
That is correct. So the chair should ask if there is a second to Phil's motion. If there is no second, we go back to the original motion. If there is a second, there can be any further discussion and a vote on the amendment.
So at this time, we do not need a second, but if there is a second, then we would vote on it. Is there a second on the amendment?
Yes, is there a second on the amendment? That's what we need to know right now.
I will second the amendment. Paul.
We have a second on the amendment, which moves football, soccer, and volleyball to August 24th start date.
I agree with Phil. I believe we need to get the kids back and get them busy. I think we can do it safe.
Any other discussion on this amendment?
I guess I'll just add more to my argument. I help out coaching also. So for the last 3 days, for 4 hours a day, I've been spending with 40 kids. Masks up, social distancing to the best degree you can in football. And it can be done. And if you could see these kids, and if people could see the excitement, like they don't care. They'll wear a mask under their helmet. I mean, these kids will do anything to to play in sports. And if we can find a way to get them back 2 weeks earlier, when we talk mental health, man, I'm seeing it. And a lot of these kids, they don't come to school for algebra. I mean, that's not their thing. Like, we can trick them into doing algebra because of sports and because of all those other things. And we know that. We know that's what school is. We find ways to engage them into school so they can learn the academic piece too. But to a lot of these kids, this is their life. And I mean, and this is just one small piece. We have volleyball kids. We have our soccer kids. We have all those sports kids. And I mean, if we can do it and it's an extra 10 days or 2 weeks of 14 days, I just think we have an obligation to give it a shot. If it's not going to work, we'll know. I mean, we'll know whether it's starting September 7th, or we'll know earlier if we start earlier.
Any other discussion on the amendment?
I'd like to just say, it's Bernie. I do agree with a lot of what Phil said, and I certainly agree with Eric's proposal and Scott's motion, but I represent a lot of schools, mostly in Dane County, that the best thing for them is to have things pushed back as much as possible. So although I agree with you that it's probably what's best for athletics across the state, I represent a lot of districts that it's not beneficial for. So that's where I'm coming from.
This is Carl. I work on the Menominee Indian Reservation in Menominee County. We are ranked 72 out of 72 counties out of the most unhealthiest counties in the state. Now, we've only had 8 positive coronaviruses tests on the reservation, but there are a lot of people on the reservation that have other health impairments that it could hamper things. Now, for us to push it back to the 7th, that gives our students a chance to participate. Because right now, it wouldn't look good. But I think if we can push it back to September 7th using the guidelines, I think that would be the best thing for our students in this area.
Any other discussion?
Eric, I would only remind the board that, and it's always a part of our annual renewal and reorientation, if you will, and you have already advised them. It is absolutely appropriate for the board to represent their district and to share the sentiments and points of view of their constituents, of their region. When you come to this board of directors, this WIAA board of control, then you put on a larger hat. And that hat requires or asks of you to hear the arguments of one another, the points of view and perspective of each other. And then after listening and considering those points of view, you are asked in this role as a WIAA Board of Control member with statewide responsibilities to do your best to do what is in the greater and best interest of this entire membership. And so it's a big lift. We know that it's a mighty lift. But you reminded the board of that early on, and I think it's at a good point to remind everyone again.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. We'll have a roll call vote, correct?
This is for the amended version.
Correct.
Yes. Yep. And so this is just on the specific amendment to move the high-risk sport date to the 24th, and we should do a roll call vote. Thank you.
I will call the roll. Mike Bigley?
No.
Willie Chambers?
You're on mute, Willie.
Sorry, no.
Phil Erdl,
Yes.
Mike Humke,
No.
Carl Morin,
No.
Bernie Nicolay,
No.
Paul Peterson,
You mute, Paul.
Yes.
Eric Russell,
No.
Dave Stevepack,
No.
Jennifer Vogler,
No.
Scott Winch.
No.
I had 2 yeses and 9 noes.
So the amendment fails. We are, correct me if I'm wrong, Brent, still on then the motion that has our practice dates for the low risk starting August 17th and for the high risk starting September 7th.
That is correct. The amendments failed, so we are back to Scott's original motion. And there would, if there's no further discussion, then a vote can be called for.
So can I ask for one more clarification? So we talked earlier about having to go to the fall, or the fall going to the spring fallback plan, if you will. That have to or that need to, is that also a choice of a conference or a district?
I would say yes.
Thank you.
Again, as much flexibility. What we're the hurdles and the concerns of our members are very real, and so what works best for you? Understanding you might want to have these conversations with other, neighboring schools. I would also advise that don't get too bent out of shape on forcing it to be a conference thing. Some of our members have conferences across multiple counties. Who is near to you that you can play? Find an opportunity to play. They might be a little bit bigger, they might be a little bit smaller, but find an opportunity to play near you.
I do have one question. September 7th is Labor Day. Do we need to consider that? Does that need to be a factor?
No, week of September 7th, I think is what you're saying.
Clarifying question about the kind of fallback model. If you cannot engage in sports at the dates that we're suggesting and you choose to be a part of the other model, would that model be by school, or would a school be allowed to move one sport into the other time frame or into the other model?
I don't see that being something that we're deciding today. I think that Scott's motion gave us the WIAA to give flexibility that we would approve a model that may or may not have that option at a later date. Is that correct?
I think that's. I think it's fair and appropriate to let us put some skin on the bones of this idea. There certainly will be other questions like Jennifer's that will need to be addressed, and probably best not to provide those sorts of answers just kind of off the cuff, to allow them to be vetted a little bit before responding. We will build this model, and we understand there will be questions, but we will bring it back to the board to let you tweak it or approve it as we present it to you.
Eric, do you want to see the calendar again before vote? Do you want to see it again?
I don't necessarily. Does somebody want to see it?
Eric?
Yes,
Mr.
Ray.
Russell, with the September 7th, it is Labor Day, but football always starts practice on a Tuesday anyway. So if they're going to play a game on a Thursday during the third week, that's still allowed because of the Tuesday start. The issue will be equipment handout, and they can do that either if their district allows it on Labor Day or on the Tuesday of the first practice. We've done that before.
Thank you for the clarification, Wade. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, Eric, I would just like to comment Dave's feedback about members voting with a statewide lens. I agree with that. I do see the CISA 3 model, or the Southwest model, as may not be perfect, but I see it as a compromise. And so I am more comfortable with that than starting delaying things, but I certainly understand it.
Any further discussion?
Eric, I just have a quick question. If we do go with that Southwest model in the second semester, can we try to make sure it doesn't go too far into June where we start to have that interruption into the other summer travel leagues and other sports that happen during the summer? You know, if we can kind of ease it up by the 14th of June, I think that'd be great. Not go through the whole month of June.
We will bring that model back to the board, and as I said, we will look to balance opportunity for our members so that they have as much opportunity for a school season as we can provide, and it might be a plan A, B, C, Mike.
Okay.
Mindful of the concerns that Willie expressed about overlap, and mindful of the concerns that we have shared with you about the intrusion in those other summertime opportunities that are, you know, the Legion baseball is just as important in some communities as our WIAA sports are to us. And we, you know, we're part of a state, you know, fabric that we got to be mindful of that.
Thanks, Dave.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing no further discussion, we will call for a roll call vote on the motion.
I will call that roll, and we are back to our original motion as described. Mike Bigley.
Yes.
Willie Chambers.
Mute, Willie.
Mute.
Willie Chambers.
Sorry about that. No.
Phil Ertl.
Yes.
Mike Humke.
Yes.
Carl Morin.
Yes.
Bernie Nicolay.
No.
Paul Peterson.
No.
Eric Russell.
Yes.
Dave Stevepack.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
I have 8 yeses and 3 noes, and the motion would pass then 8-3.
All right.
We have
Thank you everyone for that. We do have a couple other quick agenda items here. Do you have any further comments on this plan right now, Dave, or are we ready to move on to those other 2 agenda items?
I want to thank the board and the staff and Wada and the membership for the guidance. And we understand that this will make some people happy and others disappointed, but we will do our best to deliver to this membership what you have directed us to do. As far as I'm concerned, we can move on and we can be in conversation to see when some of the meat on these bones you want brought back to you, whether it's August or September, but we'll get on it.
Thank you, Dave. And yes, I reiterate the thank you to WA staff and the board and Wada and everybody. This is very difficult for everybody this time, but I know we want to get kids back participating, and hopefully we're able to do it safely and it continues right through. And this is just the starting point. So thank you everyone for all your work on this. We do have a statewide precautions initiative. Did we want, Dave, did you want to speak to that, or do you want Megan to speak to that?
Well, Megan's going to speak to that, but I think it works in concert with much of what we're hoping to do and trying to do, and addressing some of the concerns. The fact that there are concerns out there and a real virus to contend with is irrefutable. And we want to be able to try to help do our parts to try to flatten that curve, try to get it under control to the extent that we can. And we think that some of our students, athletes, and coaches and others are the best voices to help us in that. So this is an idea that we have came across from Ohio. We've modified it and put our own thoughts into it. Staff contributed, and Megan put it all together. So Megan, why don't you take over then? And this is ready to launch pretty much as soon as possible.
Yes, hopes of launching today. So as I presented to the board a little bit on Monday for some feedback, we as a staff wanted to launch something, as Dave mentioned, to promote the safe practices of social distancing, wearing a mask, things like that. And really connect the dots for the public between those safe practices and a safe return to not just sports, but as the board had wanted, a return to school, other activities, getting kids together. So after hearing the board's perspective on that, we did move forward with the campaign with the hashtag Team Up to Beat COVID. And I have a few examples here of just a sort of what the campaign will begin launching like. So something like this today is what we're hoping to launch, really reiterating that together we can do this. We can slow the spread if everyone takes part in this. So some of the captions to go along with the student or teacher, athlete or musician, parent or coach, official or cheerleader, it doesn't matter. We're all in this together. Let's team up to beat COVID. And then social distance, wear a mask in public, wash hands often, sanitize commonly used surfaces, and stay at home if you feel sick. Some of the other things, we'd like to focus on some of our seniors. This is the last opportunity for the class of 2021 to get in the classroom, to get back on stage or, on the court, on the field. And so we really want to capitalize on that, doing these safe practices is affecting people who it's their last opportunity. And some sort of catchy different things, that let's follow safe practices to get kids back in the classroom, and wear your mask so that they can wear their uniform. Some other ones that we'll be creating along the way, some more lighthearted ones, let's take down our common opponent, COVID-19, with a wrestling theme, or let's do your part to tackle the spread of COVID-19 with a football theme. So using these graphics along with some different powerful statements like that to promote it is sort of part one to that. Then we'd like to move on, as mentioned, to a part two of the campaign, soliciting kids' voices to use their energy and the powerfulness of the voices of our youth here in Wisconsin on what the return to sports would mean to them. So something that will be reaching out to coaches, ADs to get some of their athletes' perspectives on that. Throughout all of this, we want to encourage our schools, athletes, the general public, school administrators to use this hashtag and share their own reasons for, wearing a mask or practicing these safe practices. We'd really like to get this hashtag trending throughout Wisconsin. The initiative will be launched, like Dave and I mentioned today, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we'll be continuing this for as long as we feel is necessary, and that these points still need to be reiterated, because we want kids back in classrooms and back at band practice and on the court just as much as school administrators and parents and families, and we want people to feel safe doing so. So using this as a vehicle to promote those is what it's all about.
we would like to see parents and boosters and others, embrace this. If you're going to tailgate, it needs to look different. So share those pictures with us. All of us are attempting to do this in order to provide opportunities for these children. And you know what, if I got to wear a mask, and you know what, I'm in that age of risk. If I have to wear a mask to hand out a trophy or a medal or a congratulatory elbow bump or something, I want to be able to do that. And so we need that buy-in.
Thanks, Megan. Looks great.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Can we get some links so we can use that on our own social media over at school boards?
Absolutely. I'm still in the works of creating more graphics too and coming up with some more content, and it'll be an ever-evolving thing. I'd be happy to forward that on to your group.
It's good work. Yeah, we'd like to push that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Megan, same thing with Wada. If you send it to Nathan or Jeremy or I, we'll push it out as we can too.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate your buy-in on it.
Thanks. Thanks again, Megan.
I really like the theme that you came up there with that also, Megan. I think it tells a really good story, and I like the teaming up part.
Thank you. The feedback on Monday was really great and really helped generate some ideas for it as well. So thank you all for that.
All right, thanks again, and we'll enhance Games Wanted program.
Gabe, you want me to speak to that?
You bet, Tom. And
Thank you.
Steph and Eric, whoever, all the staff was a part of this can chime in as might be needed, but thanks, Tom.
Well, it was your idea. That's why I want everybody to know that you brought this one forward, and it was terrific because in anticipation of all the changes and schedules that we're going to be faced with, Dave had an idea about a COVID-19 Games Wanted webpage. So we have expanded that into a cooperative venture for Wada and the WIAA, and the staff is working together to have Eric build a web page for athletic directors, allowing them, and we're also going to allow coaches to view this so that they're aware of it too, but athletic directors will be the ones handling it. It'll be an enhanced, expanded website from our current website. It's going to be modeled after an NCAA basketball travelers model that Kate brought to our attention, and extremely user-friendly so that our ADs have easy access to things like individual sports, the level of programs, so varsity, JV, varsity reserve, freshman, whatever it happens to be, the dates of flexibility that those programs might need, whether it's head-to-head competitions, dual meets, multi-team, whenever they're starting, whenever they went down, all of these items are taken into account, and we hope that it'll also help them with lining up officials in order to get things going. So we're looking at an August 1 date to roll things out. We're going to be putting that together during the week ahead, and we are extremely hopeful this will be a great tool for the Wisconsin athletic directors to work with.
The idea stems from the fact that we anticipate pauses and disruptions, and I might be planning to come down to Waukesha South or over to play Todd's group, and all of a sudden I got to call Todd and say, hey Todd, we can't make it. And so we want Todd to be able to jump on and see if there's anyone else in the region who might also be open. Doing what we can to maximize communication and increase opportunities to find games for members, given uncertainty. We're not able to live on conference schedules necessarily anymore. But in this age of COVID and the pandemic, let's adjust, adapt, improvise, overcome, and find a game for those schools that can go. If I can't go, Eric, I'm going to reach out to you, and maybe you and I can go.
Great idea. Yep. Any help people can get, that is going to be appreciated. So thank you, everyone. Any last comments here before we adjourn? Hearing none. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Bernie, you were the second?
Yes, I was.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Challenging work.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Good luck, everybody. Take care. Wear a mask.
Thank you.
Wear a mask.
Team up to beat COVID.
Woo!